Hello, everyone. Welcome to our, now I should have counted ahead of time, our third year of the Armchair Traveler series. I can't remember quite what number this is, but this is our third year of doing Armchair Traveler in the months where it's cold and dark and we all sometimes wish we were elsewhere. Tonight, we are going to hear all about Germany and Denmark from Maria Morris. You are in a webinar, not a meeting, so you won't actually be able to talk or see each other, which can feel a little funny, but that's just so we can concentrate on what Maria is saying and see her slideshow. If you have questions as we go along, feel free to just put them in the Q&A and I will relay them to Maria. We'll also have some time at the end for more Q&A if you think of more things as we're going. So thanks for coming, everyone. And without any further ado, Maria, take it away.
Great. Thank you, Hannah. And thanks for having me. It's an honor to do this for the Patent-Free Library. I'm a champion for our local libraries because they're a pillar of our communities. And I'm so excited the Patent-Free Library offers this series. So I'm going to present on my trip to Germany and Denmark in the summer of 2022, so last summer. I'll start out with a brief introduction of myself, talk about my experience in Germany, and then Denmark, and then we'll end with Q&A. So a little bit about me. I live in West Bath. I'm married. My husband and I have been married 15 years. I'm a stepmother to 2 grown stepdaughters. I'm a gram. I have 4 grandchildren. I'm an educator, and I see myself as an explorer. My hobbies are reading, photography, yoga, cooking, and of course, travel. And my passions are learning, inspiring youth to achieve their goals, career readiness, and then of course, global education. I feel strongly that understanding our world is really a foundational skill that we all need to be successful in our lives. I traveled to Germany as part of the Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms program. This is one of the many programs that Fulbright offers. This particular opportunity is a year-long course that includes 4 phases. Because of COVID, mine ended up being almost a 3-year experience. So the first phase is a global education course. And this is a pretty rigorous course where you take a deep dive into what global education is. The second phase is a symposium in DC, where you actually meet face-to-face your cohort. And this happened in January of 2020. So just before the world shut down in March of 2020. The third phase is the international field experience. And initially I was set to travel to India in the summer of 2020. That of course was canceled. And in 2022, as countries were opening up, India wasn't quite ready to welcome large groups of travelers. So Fulbright pivoted and we went to Germany, and we were actually the first cohort to travel to Germany as part of the Fulbright TGC program. And the last phase is a capstone project that highlights what you've learned throughout this experience. Just a little bit about Fulbright. It was established, the Fulbright program was established by Senator William Fulbright, who believed that educational exchange was really valuable in raising communication and working to bring together international relations. So the Fulbright program is really a peacekeeping mission. So in June of last year, I left Maine and flew out to Chicago out of Boston, met with the majority of my German cohort members. There was 24 of us total. Most of us flew out of Chicago. A small group flew out of Denver. And then we flew on to Germany. And then after 2 weeks in Germany, I went to Denmark to reconnect with a friend that I met in Zimbabwe on my very first solo international trip in 2014. So this is my German cohort. As I mentioned, there was 24 of us from all across the United States, teaching all different grade levels and subject matters. So we started in Germany in Bonn, and Bonn is the birthplace of Beethoven. So throughout Bonn, it's not unusual to see these statues of Beethoven, and there was even some street art dedicated to Beethoven, which was pretty cool. We started our time in Bonn with a city tour. This was a private tour just for us on a double-decker bus. And so we got a tour of the city of Bonn, and that gave us a really good overview for our time there. One of my favorite spots that we saw, and we could see this from the highway, the Autobahn, was the United Nations campus. And I just really loved seeing all of the flags displayed on the campus of the UN. One thing that we learned during our tour of Bonn is that Bonn really takes pride in the green space that it has. Germany is very environmentally aware, and so Bonn takes pride in having green space, green roofs to combat the rising temperatures. They see it as a way to help cool. So in the market area of Bonn, this was something I stumbled upon. This is some sand art. And from afar, it initially actually looked like dogs lying. And as I got closer, it was a woman's sand sculpture, which was just absolutely incredible. This is called the Town Hall. It's in the Marktplatz. And just a really regal, gorgeous, stunning building in the Marktplatz that just really captures your eye. Bonn is also the birthplace of Haribo, or the gummy bear as we know it to be. So that was an important stop when we were in Bonn and stocking up on gummy bears to bring home. My grandkids were really super excited that I brought home a buffet of Haribo products. And if you're wondering, yes, the gummy bears made in Bonn do taste different than the ones that we can purchase here in the United States. The ones in Bonn are softer. Our first real day of programming for the Fulbright experience started off at the DAAD, which is the German Academic Exchange Service. And they were our partners, or the partners with Fulbright, in planning our 2-week experience in Germany. On this day, we received an overview of the education system, the robust apprenticeship program that Germany is known for, We learned about UNESCO schools and also Germany's view of STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and math. After that section, we went to Dragon's Rock, which is a 12th century castle that's set up high on a mountain. And to get to the top, we could take a tram. And this is a photograph that I took of the mirror image of the tram from one of the mirrors that they have set up so that the driver can see behind them. I just thought that was a really cool image. This picture looks down onto the Rhine River, which is the major waterway there. The following day, we took a group trip to Cologne, and this is the Cologne Cathedral. Unfortunately, it's so tall that it's difficult to get a picture of the entire church. And then on the left is some of the intricate sculpture on the church. Just incredibly gorgeous. We were able to go inside. There was a service going on when we went in, and the music was just absolutely incredible in there. Outside was some street art. So we had this artist drawing in chalk. And of course, you can see that this was to honor Ukraine and what they're going through with the war. And then inside were individual hearts or circles with the flags of different countries or states. You can see Hawaii on the left. The following day, we took a Rhine River cruise. And on the cruise, we of course saw lots of barges because they use the Rhine to transport goods, and also castles, so many castles. And I did, unfortunately, I forgot to include a photograph of this, but on the other side of the bank are vineyards for Riesling wine, so grapes for the Riesling. So following our weekend of cultural experiences, we began diving deeper into the educational system there. And our first stop was at a Berufscollege. So that is a school dedicated to particular professions. So this particular Berufscollege was a business school. They also taught agriculture, horticulture, environmental technology, office management, landscaping, and farming. So it had two interesting tracks there. And then this was one of the business labs, and we were able to witness a lesson. Students had to work in small groups to quickly plan, create a slide and quickly plan a training on for business, like workplace safety kind of thing. And it was really impressive to see how quickly and thoughtfully they worked and put together a presentation in a short amount of time. This was some of the art at that particular school. Again, we have the blue and the yellow, so supporting Ukraine and supporting the democracy of Germany. Following that, we had 3 days with our host school. So we were all broken up into small teams to go to host school. I was placed at a gymnasium, which they consider a high school, but it was a little confusing to me initially because they call grade 5 through 12 high school. So very different from what we consider high school here. As I mentioned, we were a team of 4, however, only 3 of us went. One of our cohort mates came down with COVID and had to go in quarantine. So she missed the cruise and this part, and she actually missed almost the entire trip. So these were some of the students that we met with. This was, I believe, a 5th grade class. And this class, they were so darn cute. They interviewed us, and they had prepared interview questions, and they interviewed us. And, you know, they asked some of the typical questions that you might expect that age group to ask, you know, what are your hobbies? What's school like in the United States? That kind of thing. But then they asked some really difficult questions. They asked about guns, and they also asked about race. And so we had some really good conversations that I hope enlightened them and made them see more than what they may see on the news. They also had me say some of the few words that I knew in German, and they found it funny because of my accent. And then the young boy in the navy blue t-shirt, he was really sweet. He's from Iran, and he said, "It's okay, people from America have a hard time speaking German." So I really enjoyed that and his kindness. So we spent 3 days at Helmholtz, and on our last, second to last day in Bonn, I had been testing myself daily for COVID because I had been a close contact, and I had had mild cold symptoms. But on the day that would have been my week after exposure, and I was feeling better, I tested positive for COVID. So I had to run out to the Schnell clinic to have a test. Schnell means quick in German. So I registered online, made my appointment, walked to the testing site, had my test, and walked back. And it all took about an hour. And my test results were in my email in less than 15 minutes. And unfortunately, it was positive. So I ended up in quarantine, and I was the 4th person in our cohort to end up in quarantine. So this meant that I missed our last day of programming in Bonn, and I missed traveling to Berlin with my cohort. When I finally did test negative, and they got me right on a train, and I was able to get Berlin. Unfortunately, I had to leave 2 of my cohort mates behind still. So although I was the last one in quarantine, I was not the last one out. So one of the first things that I noticed in Berlin were the bears, and they have these bears all over the city, much like we have the lighthouses throughout Maine that businesses sponsor. And the bear is the symbol of Berlin. And these were just really so much fun. And then this bear to the right is made of chocolate. German is, of course, known for chocolate, and several of the chocolate businesses had chocolate statues or figures. So that was really impressive. Another iconic symbol of Berlin is the Ample Man. And this was developed by a traffic psychologist in 1962. And this is kind of iconic now of Berlin. So these, the Ample Man symbols appear on the walking signs at crosswalks. And of course, there's a lot of sobering remembrances in Germany and in Berlin. So this is photographs of the memorial to the murdered Jews. These rectangular cubes, boxes, are made of cement. And if you'll see on the picture on the left, you'll see that the pathway kind of goes up and down, and that was done deliberately. And this was just a really sobering experience to feel the energy here, remembering those that were murdered in the Holocaust. The other thing that you'll see throughout Germany, and I'm told throughout Europe, are the stumbling stones. And these stumbling stones appear where individuals had been arrested. So it's on the sites that they were arrested. And you'll see the name of the individual when they were arrested, where they were deported to, and if known, the date of death. At the Bibelplatz is the empty library. It's not a great photograph, but it's a window within the walkway in the Bibelplatz, and you're looking down at a white space, white bookshelves that are empty. And this is a memorial to the Nazi book burnings. Again, this was another sobering sign of what had happened during that time period. And then, of course, the Embassy of the United States. And it might be hard to tell, but on the left is a Berlin bear as the Statue of Liberty. And I'm going to skip checkpoint Charlie. I'm going to go to Brandenburg Gate, and I'm going to go there because the embassy is right next to Brandenburg Gate. And on the right, I'm standing on the remnants of the Berlin Wall. Coming back to checkpoint Charlie, another iconic site in Berlin. This was a little, I guess, disappointed because it's become a bit of a tourist spot. You know, there's McDonald's you can see in the image. There's a Hard Rock Cafe and some other fast food businesses. And then we went to Potsdam as well. And the architecture here is very, very old, as you can tell, and incredibly beautiful. On this day, we attended a talk about how Germany was working to help educators who have immigrated there to get their German credentials to teach. And it is not an easy process to become an educator in Germany. It's quite rigorous. And the program that they set up to support the immigrants in getting those credentials had a low success rate because it was so difficult. And this is our cohort. On the last night, we had a nice dinner outside. At this point, we had lost 2 cohort mates. One had to fly home because her daughter was ill, and another had to depart early to get to her next phase of her journey because her flights were canceled and she had to take a train to France to catch a flight to the Faroe Islands. So from Berlin, I moved on to Denmark. So I flew to Aalborg, where I stayed for a night. And then my friend Malu, who I met in Zimbabwe, picked me up. And then we went to Joring, where she lives. She's a physician. And then I flew to Copenhagen for my last couple of days of my journey. As I mentioned, my friend Malu is a physician in Denmark. So when I developed COVID, I was very concerned about how that would impact her as a physician. And the restrictions in Denmark were less strict than that in Germany. And their quarantine period is much shorter. And if they see somebody wearing a mask, they assume that you actively have a case of COVID. And she reported that as a physician, the only time she masks up is when she knows she's handling an active COVID case. So when I arrived in Aalborg, I had a day and evening to myself. So I ventured about on my own, and I came across this square that had these United States flags made out of wood. And you had those alongside the Danish flag. And I thought that was really kind of neat. The street art in Aalborg was so much fun. And so the next several slides will highlight those images. And then in another square was this series of fountains called the Todd Plans Fountains. And this particular area, there's shops and restaurants, and the water is right across the street as well. So it's a really nice little area. After Malu picked me up, and we spent time exploring where she lives. So one of our spots that we explored was Skagen. So this was a lighthouse there. And Skagen is where the North and the Baltic Seas meet. So in this photograph, I'm standing with a foot in two different seas as they're coming together. And so that certainly is on my list of the coolest things that I've done. And we also went to the sand-covered church, which was really very cool. So what you see here is just the top of the church, the steeple. The rest of the church is buried in sand now. The following day, Malu's father and friend, who are both sailors, took us out sailing, and we went to this island, which was probably the highlight or a highlight of my time in Denmark. This little island was remarkable. This slide is just the staircase in that lighthouse that you saw. So one is looking down, the other looking up. And then there was a beach there. So it's my friend Malu in the picture. And the water was just incredibly crystal clear and warm. And then I ventured on to Copenhagen for a couple of days. And before I decided to go to Copenhagen by myself, I had spoken to Malu and asked, is it a safe city for me to be in by myself? And she said, oh yes, it's very safe. And so I arrived, got a cab, and got settled into my hotel and decided to venture out to grab some dinner. And it was very busy that day because the Tour de France that had been the day after the Tour de France had ended their start in Copenhagen. So it was still very, very busy and a lot of traffic. And there was a lot of sirens. And it struck me as odd. There were marked vehicles, unmarked vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks. And I remember thinking, what have I gotten myself into? But I still tried to find some place to eat. And every place that I went into, they kind of didn't pay me any mind. And so I was feeling a little discouraged. So I just went to the 7-Eleven. Yes, there are 7-Elevens in Denmark. And I just grabbed a salad and went back to my room and ate my dinner by myself and was really questioning having gone there. And a couple hours later, Malou texted me and said, "Are you okay? There's been a shooting in the mall a few miles from where you are." So that explained all of the sirens. So the next day, I remembered some of the advice that Malou and her parents had gave me, and I decided to do a canal tour. And that was a really great decision. So I did a canal tour. So these are images from that tour. And the image on the right is again some street art. And this one is of one of the Sustainable Development Goals. If you're not familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals, these were set by the United Nations as goals for a more sustainable world. And these, you'll see these embraced. We saw them in Germany and in Denmark. And then, of course, the famous Little Mermaid statue. It's a very popular spot for tourists. And I apologize, I'm going to probably say this wrong. I'm going to say it wrong, so I'm not even going to try, but quintessential Copenhagen with the colored houses along the canal, colored buildings along the canal and the boats. So as I end some of the stories from my trip to Germany and Denmark, I want to end with a quote from Hans Christian Andersen, who is Danish. To travel is to live. And I will say, since I've started traveling internationally and I'm still very new to doing this, my first trip by myself was in 2014 to Zimbabwe. I did 3 trips to Zimbabwe because I loved it so much. And then this was my first trip to Europe, continental Europe. So travel does enrich our lives. It changes us. And I can't imagine not traveling. So that concludes my remarks. If you have any questions, I would love to answer them.
And if you do have any questions, go ahead and just put them in the Q&A and we will answer them. I have a question to start off. You said you're fairly new to international traveling. I'm curious what made you want to start.
Yeah. So it was always been something that I wanted to do. I had my great aunt, Sim, had traveled the world, lived in Venezuela and Pakistan. And I remember as a kid just remarking at her and being like, that's really cool. I want to do that. And just money was a barrier. And also my bucket list trip was to go to Africa. And I couldn't find anybody to go with me, so I kept putting it off. And finally, my husband gave me some seed money and said, I want you to go. And so I figured it out and I went by myself. So that was 2014. 2016, I went back to Zimbabwe on a fellowship. 2018, I went back. And then I finally had the Fulbright opportunity to go to Europe. I had been to Ireland before with my husband, but in terms of traveling on my own and really getting some international travel in, it really, I opened Pandora's box in 2014.
That's great. We have a question from Stephen who asks, did you encounter any school programs like JMG?
Oh, Stephen. Stephen, who is Stephen? Because I'm a JMG specialist.
This is Stephen August.
Hi, Steve. So it was interesting. That was on my mission to learn when I was at Helmholtz Gymnasium. And unfortunately, their career educator, was out on their field day. We were there at the end of school. And field day in Germany is not field day in the United States. And so I only got to connect with her for like 15 minutes. And what she did is very, very different to what we do at JMG. However, they have a robust apprenticeship program in Germany, and it's really incredible, and they're very proud of it, as they should be. One thing that is very unique about Germany compared to the United States is that when you're in primary school, so at the end of 4th grade, a decision is made on which track you go on to for secondary school. So if your lead teacher believes that you are destined for college, you will go on to gymnasium. And if they believe that you are not, and oftentimes this is decided upon based on your family, what your family does, you will be sent another track, which often sends you into setting you up for a trade. So the individual themselves, the individual student, doesn't have a say in this. So I asked the question that about myself. So neither of my parents graduated high school. And so I asked if I were here in Germany, and that was my scenario, what were my chances to end up where I'm at now? And I was given 3 answers. The assistant principal of the school told me not very good. One of the teachers said, well, there are success stories. And then when I was on a train to Berlin, my neighbor said, oh, I was just like you, and I only ended up being able to go to college because my mother advocated for me. So I think they have some really strong points with their apprenticeship program, but it's difficult to work your way out of the track that you've been placed in.
That's really interesting. Right, we have another question from Leslie. Of all African countries, why did you choose to travel to Zimbabwe?
Yeah, so it's a long story. My initial dream was to volunteer at an AIDS orphanage. So when I kind of had this opportunity, I had to figure out, how do I travel there alone and how do I do this? And as I started researching opportunities through volunteerism agencies, I started feeling really uncomfortable about signing up to travel to volunteer at an orphanage. That it didn't feel right to me. I felt like children were becoming a tourist object, a tourist attraction. And I stumbled upon this lion conservation project. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds cool. And there was 2 in Zimbabwe, 1 in Zambia. And I did what I have my students do. I created a T-chart and for each one and did pros and cons and picked one based on the pros and cons. So that's how I ended up in Zimbabwe. When I got there, the volunteer manager for the Lions program learned what I did, and he said, you need to go to the orphanage. And I'm like, oh, damn. But he's like, I know what you're thinking. It's not like that. Just go. I just want you to meet them. And, you know, I went, I met the orphanage director and met some of the kids and really realized that that's where I belonged, which is why I went back in 2016. And then in 2018, I taught a leadership program for the boys at the orphanage and then some of the girls living in the surrounding community. And that was one of my biggest highlights of my life. That was the best thing that I've done.
Sounds like we're going to have you back next year to talk more about Zimbabwe and show us some photos. Do we have any more questions for Maria? Well, if there's no more questions, then I'm just going to say thank you for a fascinating slideshow and a little bonus about Zimbabwe. That's always exciting. And thanks everyone for attending tonight. This was great.
Thank you so much.